Part 2. That was about 5 days ago, I'd say. Mark sighed deeply, throwing kindling onto a feeble fire. And she's shown no signs of infection? An owlish man sitting across the fire looked over his shoulder at the patch of grass where Samantha slept. They sat in the middle of a small clearing in a forest somewhere. Neither knew where any more. To one side was a dense collection of underbrush that shielded them from the deeper part of the woods. To the other was a loose scattering of trees, some trails, and a pickup truck with a teenage boy in the back. He was sorting boxes. "None. I think she's clean," Mark went on somberly. "Your opinion of what's clean or not isn't what's important here." The owlish man scowled, pressing the tips of his pale fingers together pompously. "Then why don't you make a diagnosis, Doc?" Mark replied in a calm but very stiff tone. The owlish man glanced over at Samantha, inspecting her for no more than 10 seconds. "No need to worry, old man. In your words, she's clean," he shrugged. Mark leaned back from the fire, blinking smoke out of his face and breathing fresh air. "So you going to let us in this little club?" he asked, in a voice that hinged on threatening. "It isn't a club," the teenager replied, traces of the Orient thick in his voice and face. "We have to stick together. You have to stay with us." "Well, hang on just a minute." The owlish man rose to his feet to face the Chinese boy. "The more people we gather, the more we risk infection." "Shh, Doc! You'll wake the girl," Mark hissed, motioning for the man to sit back down again. The owlish man didn't listen, but marched across the small clearing to the side of the truck bed, where the teenager was crouching among the boxes. "You keep taking on refugees like this, and I might just have to cut you all loose," he threatened the boy, not troubling to keep his voice low. Mark rose too at his words, about ready to throw his weight around, but he needn't have bothered. Before he could take one step, the Chinese boy in the truck laughed and shook his head. "Fine, cut loose," he said, and waved an inviting hand towards the thicket. "You forget that being a doctor doesn't mean much anymore. You are not the leader just because of your glasses and your PhD. If you want to leave, go ahead, but don't assume you can take any supplies with you. Since you seem to like naming things that are yours, then I should remind you that this is mine." He patted the side of the wheel well. "It's not yours, you dirty thief," the doctor hissed, leaning forward until his thick glasses nearly touched the teenager's face. Still, the boy did not move. "Well, the person who rightfully owns it is burned up in a liquor store. He's dead now, just like everybody else." He gave an evil sort of sneer that brightened his face and made his eyes flash. The owlish man blinked, then backed down and returned to the fire. "I suppose we're stuck with you then," he muttered to Mark, again glancing over to where the girl slept. "Much obliged," Mark said dryly, not rejoining the doctor around the fire, but rather going over to the truck. "You got a name, son?" he tried asking politely, but found he was more on edge around the boy than the doctor. The boy paused in his work, concealing a sigh. "Hasn't been wise for a Chinese man to speak his name lately, much less say anything at all." Mark nodded, in agreement more than understanding. The green had started out as an epidemic in Asia, after all. But Mark tried to remind himself that the source hardly mattered now. "Well, pick something for us to call you," he bargained, his back stiff and face strained to stay casual. The boy looked up from his sorting, eyes inspecting Mark's face, not liking what he saw. "Chin," he said simply, then cast his eyes back down to the cargo. "All righty, Chin it is." Mark slapped the metal of the truck, then left Chin to his sorting. The bed was full of crates and a few drums of water. All of it would be green in about a week, if not eaten or cooked. Some of it already was. The men had hardly gotten settled around the fire when a crash put them back on their toes. Chin was standing up in the truck bed, throwing crates out, and dumping one of the barrels of water over the edge. "What the hell?" The doctor sprang to the truck and reached for the broken crate on the ground. "It's green." Chin's prompt words stopped the doctor's hand before it closed around a packet of thawing fish sticks. "That means the rest of it could be green too," Mark yelled, eyeing the last 3 crates as though they were an enemy. Then his focus snapped to Chin. "Why did you bring along green food? All you're doing is getting the clean stuff infected. You—" He broke off as a rustling behind him signaled that Samantha was awake and on her feet. "What's going on?" she asked, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes and surveying the tense scene. "Nothing," Mark answered tensely, still glaring at the boy. "We're going to have to cut some rations is all," the doctor explained cautiously, eyes darting back and forth between Chin and Mark. "Turns out we can't take as much as we wanted to." An odd silence fell between the four, and a sour wind blew through the clearing, the only sound in the absence of human voices. Then the Chinese boy jumped out of the back of the truck and opened the driver's side door. "Got to be moving on," he told the group in a blank sort of tone. "3 in the cab, 1 in the back," and he took his place behind the wheel. "Come along, young lady," the owlish man muttered as he led Samantha to the passenger side door and held it open for her. His face was neutral until he glared at Mark. "Perhaps you should be the one in the back for now." "Perhaps I should," Mark nodded stonily, lifting himself over the side of the truck and into a spot between the crates and the barrels. The doors slammed and the engine woke up, pulling the truck out of the clearing. Mark watched the dinky fire sputter and die under his retreating gaze, and the food, growing smaller and smaller as they drove away, offered up as a sacrifice to the green.